A young man rides a train, flipping through his notebook where he's jotted down a few promises. No more drinking, fighting, or crying. One task reads, eat a cookie. He eats the cookie, checks it off, and arrives at a small town. Heading to his family's diner, his sister Siju tells him to hang around until their mother gets back in the evening. With time to kill, he visits the local bathhouse, but is puzzled to find a scanner lock on the door. As he fumbles with it, the loud beeping annoys a nearby man, who approaches, ready to reprimand him. However, as the young man starts undressing, the stranger's attitude shifts. His body is covered in intricate dragon tattoos, a clear sign of his ties to the underworld. The young man Taisik has just been released from prison after serving a decade for murder. That evening, he pays a visit to his old friend, Cheonmu, who is busy chastising his subordinates. The two are genuinely happy to see each other again. Taisik explains he stopped by as a courtesy, then says goodbye and leaves. However, Cheonmu's cheerful demeanor masks his real feelings. He instructs his men to keep a close watch on Taisik while he's in town. Later, Taisik returns home and reunites with his mother. She is delighted to see him, but his sister is far less welcoming. The next morning, Taisik heads to the police station to report his return to the area. An officer there recognizes him from their school days. The officer warns him to leave town, as the locals haven't forgotten or forgiven his past. But Taisik calmly assures him he won't cause any trouble. At one point, Taisik visits a doctor to inquire about removing the dragon tattoos on his body. However, the doctor advises against it, explaining that the process would leave extensive scarring and is also incredibly costly. Meanwhile, his mother confronts a local official named Cho. She barges into his office and demands that he stop harassing her diner and sending his goons to cause trouble. Later, Taisik is seen sitting on the roof of their house. His sister tries to drive him away, declaring it as her personal retreat where no one else is welcome. When Taisik asks her to call him brother, she flatly refuses. Afterward, Taisik finds work at a nearby auto repair shop. One day, two police officers spot him and start reminiscing about the past. A decade ago, Taisik was feared by everyone in town. He held absolute power, and no one dared to challenge him. However, when the local boss and what remained of his gang decided to defy him, Taisik responded by stabbing their leader. That act landed him a 10-year prison sentence, during which his two friends took over the town's operations. Over time, a new player, Cho, emerged. While Cho is now campaigning for public office, he previously ran a brothel in the area. Determined to reclaim his place, Taisik confronts the two town bosses and compels them to swear allegiance to him. With Cho aiming for higher political power and controlling most of the town, Taisik's unexpected return shakes up the balance of power. What makes Taisik even more unnerving is how much he has changed. His actions and motives are now impossible to predict. One day, his younger sister is shocked to find him at her school. Taisik has decided to enroll and continue his education. Taisik's sister's teacher turns out to be his former girlfriend. The two take a walk, during which Taisik apologizes to her for his past mistakes. Later, he meets up with his sister, who is admiring a multiplayer console displayed in a shop window. She excitedly explains its features, like watching movies and listening to music. Having been in prison for so long, Taisik is unfamiliar with these advancements and assumes she's joking. Just then, a young man suddenly strikes him. The boy, who has been pursuing Taisik's sister for 2 years, is furious about a stranger getting close to her. He drags Taisik into an alley and starts beating him, while his friends hold the girl back. Hyeju is clearly fed up with her persistent admirer and doesn't know how to deal with him. The group joins in the attack, pummeling Taisik. But when his ripped shirt reveals the dragon tattoos on his body, they immediately stop in fear. Seizing the moment, Taisik calmly walks away without retaliating. Later, at home, his sister gives him ointment and bandages to treat his injuries. Meanwhile, Cho is hosting a celebratory dinner after being elected to the city council. Surrounded by his henchmen, he announces an enticing reward. Control of the city's largest nightclub will go to the person who can secure the land owned by an elderly woman, Sunflower. One of the henchmen looks visibly uncomfortable. He knows Sunflower is Taisik's mother, their former boss. However, the nightclub is too tempting a prize for them to ignore. Determined to impress Cho, Cheonmu promises to handle the situation, either by negotiating with the woman or demolishing her home. Cheonmu remains oblivious to the fact that Sunflower's son is their former boss and the town's one-time ruler. The next morning, he and his gang show up at the old lady's diner. Ignoring Taisik, who is quietly eating breakfast, the thugs begin wrecking the place. Unaware of who is seated nearby, they carry on until Cheonmu himself walks in. The moment he sees Taisik, he freezes in shock. When Taisik grabs him by the throat and slams him against the wall, Cheonmu is on the verge of breaking down. The tension is broken only when Sunflower intervenes, prompting the gang to hastily flee the diner. Later, Cho is informed about who resides in Sunflower's house. Realizing it's Taisik, he recalls the incident from 10 years ago, when Taisik killed the town's previous boss, clearing the path for Cho's rise to power. Cho orders his men to closely monitor Taisik and report on all his movements. As time passes, Taisik and his sister bond while sitting on the roof. Their relationship gradually warms, with Taisik helping her improve her math skills and Hyeju teaching him some English in return. The next day, Taisik receives his first paycheck and buys thoughtful gifts for his mother and sister. Initially, Hyeju accuses him of trying to win them over, but she later realizes her mistake and reconciles with him. One morning, she grabs his notebook, teasing him about his personal rules, but she promises to fulfill one of them. She takes him on a picnic as a gesture of goodwill. The family enjoys a peaceful outing together in the countryside. However, one evening after work, Taisik is approached by a man with a limp, one of the gang members connected to the murder that sent Taisik to prison. The man warns him that his family's land has become a prime target for the local boss and advises him to leave town with his loved ones for their safety. Taisik's meeting with the limping man does not go unnoticed. Criminals assigned to watch him report the encounter to their superiors. Over tea, Cheonmu and his associates speculate on why the limping man would meet with their former boss. They conclude that Cho might have offered Taisik control of the city's largest nightclub, which they are also vying for. This theory enrages the gang, and they decide it's time to eliminate their former leader once and for all. The next morning, Cheonmu and his crew return to the diner, this time with no restraint. They force the elderly woman outside and begin demolishing the place. Hyeju runs to find Taisik, but by the time they return, the gang is already gone. Left with no choice, the family begins to clean up the destroyed diner. Later, Taisik confronts Cho directly, asking him to leave his family and their land alone. After Taisik departs, Cho devises a sinister plan. He decides to provoke Taisik into violating his parole, ensuring he will be sent back to prison. The following morning, a jeep pulls up at the repair shop. The gang leader confronts Taisik, quickly escalating the situation into a violent altercation. Within minutes, the thugs are beating Taisik and his boss. However, Taisik remains calm, refusing to retaliate. Unable to provoke him, the gang leaves empty-handed. That evening, Hyeju's persistent suitor shows up at the diner. He questions why the elderly woman adopted the man who killed her son. Somehow, he has learned this long-kept secret. Hyeju overhears the conversation, shocked as she was unaware of this truth. That night, the elderly woman opens up to Hyeju, explaining everything. She recounts how Taisik made a grave mistake in his youth, one he deeply regretted. She describes how he wept and repented for his action, consumed by remorse. She realized Taisik wasn't a bad person and began visiting him in prison, eventually deciding to adopt him. While he sits on the roof contemplating his next steps, Hyeju approaches him and pleads with him to stay. She confesses that when he killed the town's boss 10 years ago, her biological brother, who frequently abused their mother, she felt a sense of relief knowing no one would hurt their mom again. She promises to call him her brother from now on and begs him to stay. The next morning, Taisik's mother confronts Cho in his office once more. She reveals that she knows the full truth. 10 years ago, Cho manipulated both her son and Taisik into a fatal conflict. Afterward, he deceitfully claimed the surrounding sunflower fields and is now targeting her land. She places a copy of her late son's journal on his desk and warns that she will expose its contents unless he leaves her family alone. Cho's limping henchman overhears the conversation and later informs Taisik of everything. Meanwhile, the gang members are seen playing ball, with the high schooler pursuing Hyeju loitering nearby. Determined to cause harm, the young man waits on his motorcycle for Hyeju to cross the street. As she does, he speeds past and strikes her on the head with a brick. Later, Taisik and his mother are at the hospital, sitting by an unconscious Hyeju's bedside. The next day, Taisik goes to Cho and informs him that his family will leave town in a few days. However, Cho demands a price in return Taisik's hand. Only then will he leave them alone. Taisik agrees, and Cho orders his limping henchman to sever Taisik's right hand. Reluctantly, the henchman complies, cutting the tendons and assuring his boss that Taisik will never be able to use his hand again. Satisfied, Cho lets Taisik leave. On the way back, the limping man quietly reveals to Taisik that he only inflicted a minor injury and that his hand will eventually heal. He calls it his parting gift. A concerned henchman advises Taisik to leave town immediately, warning him of the danger. However, at the same time, Cho issues his own orders to the gang. While Taisik remains at the hospital with his unconscious sister, the thugs invade his mother's house. They brutally kill her by hanging, forge her signature on the land sale documents, and steal the incriminating journal. Cho's gang moves forward with their plan. That night, Taisik returns home to discover his mother's lifeless body hanging from a noose. After the funeral, the family diner is demolished, flattened to make way for a commercial complex. When Hyeju finally regains consciousness, Taisik cannot bring himself to tell her the devastating truth about their mother's death. Later, Taisik is overcome with grief. He abandons all his personal rules, drinking heavily and crying as memories of his mother flood his mind. Meanwhile, Cho celebrates the grand opening of an extravagant nightclub, appointing his 2 henchmen as its managers. The celebration is interrupted by Taisik, who makes an unexpected appearance. He spares only the limping henchman, allowing him to leave unharmed. The gangsters are bewildered by Taisik's confidence, particularly since they believe his injured hand renders him defenseless. The first to confront him is the thug responsible for attacking Hiju. Before the man can make his move, Taisik swiftly turns the knife against him, fatally wounding him. Sealing off the exit by setting it ablaze, Taisik eliminates any chance for escape. Cho commands his men to attack. Armed with bats, they charge at Taisik, but he cuts through them effortlessly, leaving a trail of bodies behind. Eventually, he comes face to face with the man who murdered his mother. Though the thug manages to stab Taisik, it only fuels his resolve. Unstoppable, Taisik continues his rampage, his fury and pain transforming him into an unstoppable force. He reaches Cho and ends his reign, killing him and avenging his family. In the aftermath, Taisik sits on the porch of the burning nightclub, consumed by emptiness. With nothing left to fight for, he simply watches the flames. The scene shifts to Hyeju. Now a graduate, she defends her thesis and later sits in a park, looking at a photo of her mother and brother. In her heart, she understands that remembering them is what truly matters. Through memory, their love lives on. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more movies. Recap like this.